Hello there, this is my video on my experience with the Digitech JamMan Stereo. So first of all, before I get started, check the description below because I'm going to put there chapter markers that you can navigate through the video with if you only want to see part of what I'm going to describe. So let's start with the start, and the most important thing to know about this device, at least as far as I'm concerned, is that you can only have one loop in temporary memory at one time. Okay? And that you also, on the other hand, have 99 loops that can be in stored memory at one time. So that is going to basically set the format and the constraints of this device as far as how you can use it in which application, which I'll get to later. But let's take a look at the device and go through the basics of it. So here it is. It's got 4 foot pedals, which we'll get to in a minute. In terms of inputs and outputs, it's fairly complete. So it is a stereo device, as the name indicates. So you can input, for example, you can play with a stereo keyboard, or you can input and output like a stereo mixer as well, if you want to have even more inputs. It also has a microphone input, which is practical. So, and you can also use it, for example, if you're not a keyboard player but you're a guitar player, you could plug in 2 guitars at the same time, and you have the outs for that as well, or a guitar and a bass, for example. We also have, which is nice, a headphone output, and you also have an aux input if you want to use an external source of music, like an MP3 player or whatever. In addition to the already large amount of memory that this device has natively, you also have a SD card slot, which is very nice as well. And so that makes this device kind of more oriented around pre-programmed live shows, in my opinion, but I'll get to that. You also have a USB connector, so you can manage the memory of the device and exchange files between the device and your computer as well. So the file connectivity is quite nice. And you have DC power. You cannot power this device with batteries. You have to use DC power. Alright, so let's get to the only thing I wanted to mention therefore about the microphone input. Some devices like the Boss RC30 looper do have these days phantom power on the mic. This one does not, unfortunately, so if you want to use a condenser mic, that's not possible with this device. You have to use a dynamic mic, which of course in a live application is what you would use. But if you want to use this to make YouTube videos at home, it's a little bit of a shame that they didn't include phantom power. So let's get to the pedals and controls on the front of the device. You have 4 pedals, which is really nice. Making it easy to navigate the important features of this device, which basically, if you know anything about loopers, one of the main problems if you only have one pedal is that to stop you usually need to double tap, which is a bit of a pain if you're trying to keep your rhythm. There are some people that say that they don't mind it, or they've learned how to double tap or whatever, but when you're trying to keep rhythm, you're playing, you know, usually I'm a guitar player, usually I'm singing and playing guitar, and if you're trying to double tap, that's a little much while you're trying to keep the rhythm of guitar and sing at the same time. So it's really great. I would recommend if you want to do any live performing, and you're looking for a looping pedal, that you at least get a pedal with two different foot switches, because it's really nice to be able to just hit stop once. And here we have the record, play, overdub foot switch that every looper basically has. And then here we have a stop switch, and then if you hold it down, it clears the loop that you've recorded. Like I said, there's only one loop in temporary memory at one time with this device. Unfortunately, that's one of the limitations of it. But at the same time, you have a lot of stored memory, as I said, that the loop number is indicated on the little LCD screen here that gives you a number from 1 to 99. And it's very nice that without any additional pedals, you can easily navigate to a different stored memory setting with these two other pedals, making it really nice and easy to, for example, have one recorded loop for a verse and another recorded loop for a chorus, and you can switch between the two seamlessly, which is really nice, so that you can just basically, once you're at the last version of your verse loop before you go to the chorus, and you know that your chorus is the next incremental stored memory number up in memory, well, before that verse loop ends, all you have to do is hit loop up, and it will automatically cue and in time bring in the chorus loop right afterwards, which is pretty cool. So let's get to the controls. Oh, before I go on to the controls, there are many people on the internet that complain that they don't like the click sound, that the click sound is too loud on these. Actually, I like the click sound, because for this I had and returned a Boss RC30, which is a similar pedal in many ways, not in all ways, but I found with the Boss, sometimes I was a little confused about when in my push was the exact right point of stop or start of the loop. When was it being engaged? And I personally enjoy the click feedback on these foot switches, because I know exactly, as far as my timing is concerned for starting and stopping the loop, when it's being activated. Because just to make things even more complicated, from what I hear, some of these looping pedals actually only activate when you release, and some of them activate when you push. This one is clearly of the type that activates when you push and not when you release. I'm talking for timing now, because of course it does also take into account the hold time for certain functions. But I'm talking about the controls that are activated with only one push. So moving on to the face of the device, we have a lot of controls here. I think they're pretty well done and pretty useful, and I think they're described pretty well in the manual that is delivered with the device. So I'm not going to go over all of them. You know, they're basically controls about how to store and delete loops, how to save them. You can also even copy loops from one location to another in case you want to For example, you have a loop that you like and you want to store to memory another loop with another layer on it, you could do that. So that's an interesting option. It's not really live looping again, but for example, if you had a verse loop that you like, and then you have a second verse loop where when the verse loop repeats, you want an extra layer on it, well, you can do that with this very easily. And then you would just have to, during your live performance, use loop up or loop down to get to that new loop with that added layer on it. I'm not going to go over all of the different ways that you record and store to memory and all that. I think it's pretty well done, but I think that would take a little long for this video. Already my videos tend to be a little long. I'll just go over the knobs on top. You have a loop level volume, so that's cool and pretty necessary. You have a rhythm level volume because there are 10 rhythms included. The quality is not amazing, but it is very nice to have these rhythms to at least be able to time your loop very well, and then that way you have no loop. Basically, what I'm trying to get at is that if you do looping free time, it can sometimes be difficult, unless you practice it or unless you're very good at it, to have a seamless loop. And so having a sort of metronome or drum beat that's constant can be very nice to make sure that your loop is seamless, along with the auto-quantize feature, which I'm going to get to. But anyway, so you can set the level that the drums that are available on this machine have in your mix, in your output mix. Also, there's a somebody's at the door, but I think I'm not going to get it at this point. There's a mic level volume control as well, which is definitely needed, and an instrument level volume control that controls the two stereo jack inputs, whether it be keyboard or guitar or drum machine. So that's great. You have the 4 volume controls that you would want to use this thing as a little mixer properly. So there we go. Let's see. And I think the sound quality of the knobs is average. I've definitely seen worse. I've definitely seen much cheaper knobs. I think if you treat it well, it should survive, no problem. And I think the quality of the rest of it is pretty good in terms of the foot switches and the quality of the chassis. The chassis, I think it would survive. I think it would survive live shows if you make sure to treat it decently. So, and then I wanted to get to the sound quality. So this is an issue because that I didn't realize was so much of an issue. Some people call it tone suck. And this relates to basically how much does just playing through the pedal degrade your sound or not. I wasn't really aware before I started trying these pedals of how much of an issue it can be. And that's one of the reasons that I sent the Boss RC30 back so quickly, is because just running my sound through the Boss RC30 just kind of made my sound muddy and sound imprecise, and it lost some highs and lows, and So I'm going to talk about that first with this pedal. It's not awesome. You do lose a little bit in terms of tone with this pedal. Just running your mic through it. I'm not talking about the loop quality for the moment. I'm just talking about you plug your mic into this and then you plug your mic into your amp. How does that sound versus plugging your mic into your amp directly, right? That's what I'm talking about. Or with your guitar. How does your guitar sound just running your guitar into the mono input and the mono output and then into your amp, right? Instead of running your guitar straight to your amp. That's what I'm talking about here. And there is a little bit of so-called tone suck. There is a loss of quality. I'll be honest. For this one and for the Boss RC30. Now, I didn't have both of these devices at the same time, but I'm a little bit happier with the sound quality of the JamMan Stereo. Still, it is a bit of a shame that you do lose a bit in sound quality that way. So that's something to know that I wasn't totally aware of before I ordered these pedals. So now, on the other hand, there's the loop quality. And the loop quality has to do with the digital sampling format. Now, both the Boss pedals and this pedal use 44 kilohertz 16-bit sampling quality, which in my opinion is a little bit of a shame. These pedals were made, I don't know, in 2011, 2012, maybe it was good at that time. I would have preferred to see 24-bit sampling quality in these pedals. That said, when you lay down a loop, what you hear is the device coming direct in an analog fashion through the pedal, and then once you start playing back the loop, usually it's not the lead instrument, it's a background thing, and so having only 16-bit sampling is not that big a deal. You do lose a little bit even more of precision and sound quality, but actually it's not that big a deal unless it's the lead, right? If you want to use this pedal as, like, you want to have loops going that are going to be your lead instrument, it's not that awesome in terms of quality. On the other hand, if you have another lead that's live, either you're playing a guitar lead, or you're playing a synth lead, or you're singing as the lead instrument in a live setting, then I don't find it a big deal to have the backing tracks a little bit degraded in quality, and in fact, it kind of helps separate in the mix that's coming out of the device the lead from the backing track. So again, if you want to have lead loops, I think 16-bit sampling is really a shame, and that's what you get with this device. If it's just a backing track, it's not as big a deal. Alright, let's move on from there. That was sound quality. I already talked about durability. Oh, I wanted to also speak about the readability of the device itself when it's in use, right? Because it's one thing to have it right in front of you and to play with it, but it's another thing when it's at your feet and you're actually trying to perform. So, in my case, I don't have 20/20 vision. Most of the time I don't wear glasses, but I was having trouble with my vision telling the difference between the loop numbers, which is kind of a shame because I don't, when I perform, I never wear glasses, at least up until this point. And performing with this live would force me to wear glasses. So that's just me. But on the other hand, I'm just talking about the memory number displays, which is what you need to remember and use in order to change between saved loops. So that was the real thing that was bugging me visually. when performing. As far as the rest, as far as the LEDs that change color to show, it changes different colors, for example, from green to orange to red or stuff like that, depending on whether you're recording, whether you're playing back the loop, or whether you're overdubbing. That's fine. That works well, and that's nice to have that feedback. And as well as the LEDs here that tell you what's going on with your loop as well. So there we have it. Just know that if you're somebody like me that goes through life without glasses, but you don't have 20/20 vision, you might not be able to read as well as you like the loop numbers when you're performing, when it's at your feet, basically. Right, so let's get to the rhythm samples, auto-quantize, and the tap tempo. Now, you can tap a tempo into here, which is cool, which is pretty necessary if you want to use it live, I think. And it gets the drum sample that's loaded into the rhythm section, whose volume is decided here, going as a sort of metronome that you can play to. Now, the shame with this device is you can't set manually the tempo. You have to tap it. Now, it's still not too bad. Apparently it does take into account more than 2 taps. Some of these devices, from what I've heard, only take into account the difference between the last 2 taps, which is really pretty approximate. This one takes into account and averages several taps, which is more precise in terms of the rhythm you want to get. But still, the tempo tends to come out a little bit faster, a little bit slower than I would really like in the end, which is a bit of a shame. It would have been nice to be able to correct the tempo to a very precise tempo with, for example, this knob and having the beats per minute or something in the LCD. You cannot do that here. It's only tap tempo, but the tap tempo does work pretty good for a tap tempo. And then you have the auto-quantize feature, which if you want to have clean loops and you're not a god of timing, as I am not, or at least maybe I don't have enough practice with these devices, I'm sure you can improve upon it, but it certainly is nice to have the auto-quantize feature, and I'm going to explain what that is. It basically means that when you start your loop, right, if you have a tap tempo going and you've set your tempo, then you go to record your loop. It means if your tap to start the recording or to stop the recording, the loop is a tiny bit off, it makes it so that your loop is right on the beat, which is cool. That allows you to do lots of layers without any sort of artifacts or whatever at the beginning or the end of the loop. If you didn't start or stop your loop right on time, this corrects it for you. So that's pretty cool. And if you want to have clean sounding tracks, it's pretty necessary as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure some people would beg to differ and tell me that, you know, you got to improve your timing or whatever. Yeah, so everybody will have their own opinion about that, but basically it has this feature called auto-quantize, which cleans up the timing of your loops to a sort of metronome beat or to a backing rhythm beat, which is cool. And then if you don't want the artificial rhythm in the final thing, you just turn your rhythm down to 0 and you have a clean in-time loop that you can use as a backing track, right? So let's get now to the applications that you could use this device for, because it can be used for certain things but not for others. So the main limitation of this device, I find personally, as a looper, is that you can't save a loop to stored memory on the fly. You have to stop the playback of the loop that's going on in temporary memory in order to save it. This is the real main limitation of the device, and all of the devices that I've looked at have this limitation. There may be some that are coming out or that I haven't seen that don't, but it's kind of a shame. It's kind of a shame because what does that mean? That means that if you create a loop and then you want to go on to another loop and then come back to the first loop, you have to redo the loop, which live, I mean already, if you've watched some of these videos with looping covers or whatever, already it takes some time to establish your loop. You don't want to establish a first loop, ditch it, establish a second loop, and then come back to the first loop to establish it again. It's just going to make your song way too long and way too boring as far as I'm concerned. Establishing even one loop, if you add tons of layers, to me can be kind of boring already. And so that's where I come from. I'll let you know right away. I'm not a huge fan of the song that just lasts forever with the same loop over and over, and you're just adding layers and layers and layers and layers and layers onto the loop. If that's your thing, this will work fine, no problem. And the other limitation I want to get to with most of these devices, and this one is the same. Imagine you're establishing lots of layers on the loop that's in temporary memory. Well, you can't just, you either have to erase all of those layers or you can undo the previous layer. But you can't undo, let's say you have a loop in your temporary memory that has 5 layers. You can't undo the previous 2 layers or the previous 3 layers, which would be nice. But here you can't do it. And with most devices you can't do it. You get a hold to undo, and you can hold to redo. So you can, on the fly, take off the previous layer of your loop that's in temporary memory, or you can put it back, which allows you to, for example, like I said, maybe you have a verse that's cut into 2 sections, and you want the first section to have just 1 loop on it, and you want the second section to have a second loop on it. Well, you could do the first loop, add your second layer onto the loop, and then undo it so that when you come back to, say, the second verse, you have the bare first layer of the loop, and then you redo for that second part of the second verse that has the additional second layer that you already recorded live, right? That's possible use of the undo redo. But you can't undo redo multiple layers in multiple ways. You can only undo redo the most recent layer of your loop in temporary memory. So that's another limitation for those of you that are not used to these loopers, as I was not up until recently. So let's get to the practical applications. How can this thing be used, and how can we not use this device? What can't we do with it? Well, I, as someone who prefers, being able to do songs that have a verse and a chorus, meaning you have a verse of your song that has 1 chord progression, and you have a chorus of your song with a 2nd chord progression. I prefer to be able to do songs like that. The whole looping, infinite loop thing with the same chord progression x 20 million times I find kind of boring. I think it can be done well, but it's just not my preference in terms of song types, although I admit sometimes I do songs like that, but I don't want my whole set live or my whole gig to be just songs of the infinite loop. That's too much for me. So there are these 2 different categories of songs, is what I'm trying to say. You have the song that's the same chord progression the whole way through, and you have the song where you have more than 1 chord progression, right? And so for the songs that have only one chord progression the whole way through, a device like this could be used for what I'll call live looping. Now, I just distinguished between two different types of songs. Let's distinguish between two types of live looping. You either can establish all of your parts live, which is sort of the most authentic version of live looping, right? There's nothing that's going to be playing throughout your entire song that you didn't lay down live right now. Or there's the type of looping where you allow yourself to bring in backing tracks, right? So this is going to be my breakdown of when you're using the two different types of songs that I specified and the two different types of live looping, what are you able to do with this device, right? So, based on the constraints of this device, you cannot do a totally live song with a chorus structure and a verse structure that are different chord progressions, okay? You can't do it because what's going to happen, you're going to lay down some stuff on a loop. It's in temporary memory. You can't save it while you're in the middle of a live performance because you have to stop everything. And like I said, if you lose your temporary loop and then you go to record a loop for your chorus, you're not going to want to come back and lay down the verse loop again. I don't know, maybe you could do it. To me, that's just going to make the song so heavy and so long. So I don't see this as a device where you can actually do a song that has a different verse chord progression and chorus chord progression and do it all live. Lay down all of the sounds you're using live, which is sort of the most authentic way of looping, right? On the other hand, this device works very well if you allow yourself to come in with a backing track or two. You can seamlessly live change stored loops, and it works very well. And so if you allowed yourself, for example, to have a skeleton chord progression of your verse and a skeleton chord progression of your chorus that you didn't lay down live but just came in the form of a backing track, then you can do it. Then this device works very well. So that's kind of one of my main concerns with these loopers, is they don't handle songs with a verse chord progression and a chorus chord progression very well. And this device, like I said, since it only has one temporary loop, it doesn't handle the huge stacking of live loops that well either, since you only have undo and redo for the most recent addition to your stacking of loops in that temporary memory. And I think I said it, but I'll just say it, you know, once you change loops up or down, meaning you change a location in stored memory, your temporary loop disappears. And you can't save it to stored memory, like I said, without stopping your loop, bending over and pressing store, and then saving it to a particular memory location that you can choose. So let me try to summarize again, so it's pretty clear and not too complicated. This, I think, is a good device if you want to bring loops with you, backing loops. That's what I would say. It's a really nice device. If you want to set up your songs, you would have to, the other limitation is that you would have to write on your set sheet, you know, song A, verse, such and such a memory number. Song A, chorus, such and such a memory number, right? That's the other disadvantage. You can't select songs by anything but number, right? You can't select your memory loops. So the main use of this device, I think, would be to allow yourself to do some pre-recorded tracks. And that allows you, obviously, live more flexibility if you're a solo artist to sing or to solo over another chord progression. You bring in some backing tracks and you change between them on the fly as you like, meaning it gives you the flexibility. If you want to go another time through the solo, you want to prolong your solo, you want to shorten your solo, that you can control with the foot pedals here by going back and forth between stored memory locations. That's what I think this pedal is for. Live performances where you want to change loops on the fly, but you want to come in with some backing tracks. There you have it. I think it's a good device for that. I think if you want to do the infinite loop thing, it's not that great because you don't have much control over how many layers your loop has. It only has one temporary memory loop track at a time. So yeah, I think I said it. That is my experience with the Digitech JamMan Stereo. Goodbye.